Hi folks, Michael Genese here. I'm the composer of The Highest Arm for Amplified Flute and Electronics, and I'm just going to show you what it might look like to set up your technology to play this piece. In the score, I lay out several options for what you might need, and what I'm going to show you today is not exactly what your stuff might look like. You might have different looking technology and a different setup where you are, but this is just to offer an example. So we're going to go over the hardware first before we do anything on the computer. What you need to do outside the computer is what we're going to cover now. So the first thing that you need is an audio interface. And this basically feeds sound from various sources into the computer and out of it. So you have various inputs where you put microphones and outputs where you put cables that will go to speakers in this case. So the first thing we'll do is set up the microphone. Since you need to amplify the flute, my microphone's a bit off camera, I've got one right here. You might elect to use one that attaches to the flute. Either way, that microphone will need to be plugged in somewhere, most likely. So my microphone cable looks like this, and I'm going to plug it into the interface. I'll put it into input 1. It says mic, there's 1 and 2 on this side. I put it into 1. Next, you need to plug the interface into your computer. I'm going to plug mine in on this side. So you've got your amplified flute, you'll have the electronics on the screen. You need to get all of that sound out to stereo speakers. So I've got 2 cables, one for the one on the left and one for the one on the right. There's 1 left, 2 right, and I'm going to use those, 1 for each speaker. This one will go into left. Now I'll plug that into the speaker, and this one will go to the right speaker. So once again, we've got the microphone that goes into the interface. We've got these cables going out to the speakers, and all of this is plugged into the computer. Now lastly, for hardware, if you elect to use a click track during performance, I have headphones here, you might have an earpiece, and in this demonstration I'm going to show you what it's like to plug it into the computer directly. It is possible for you to also route the click track out of another output of the interface, but just practically, usually folks are only working with a couple of outputs on most interfaces, so I'm going to show you what it's like to have the click track come out here. Next, let's look at what's going on the computer screen. So firstly, you will need a computer, of course, and secondly, the sound files that I provided with the score. So you see that we have a click track file, we have the PDF of the score, we have the soundwalk version of the piece, we have the normal electronic version of the piece, and then we have the electronics with the click track itself, just to combine them. That's purely for practice purposes. But we have to put the electronics file, depending on which one you're using, and the click track, if you would like it, into an audio program. I'm going to be using Ableton Live because that's the program that I use, but there are plenty of free audio programs that you can use. If you don't have Ableton, that's okay. And what we need is 3 audio tracks. So I'm going to name them. One will have the electronics file. One will be for the flute that'll pick up the microphone. And one, if you are using a click track, could be this. Ableton does have a built-in click that you can sort of route around wherever you'd like without having this. But most audio programs, it's a bit easier just to have one. So I'm going to demonstrate that here. Next, we have to load the files. So I'll start with the electronics file. I move it into the electronics track. You'll see here that it's loading. Next, we're going to line up the click track. The click track will go here. Now, in order to set up the flute, we have to make sure that Ableton recognizes our interface, or any audio program that you're using. So I'm going to go into the program's preferences, the settings. So it says audio input device. It says no device, so we've got to click the one we need. My interface is called Audience ID 14, so I'm going to click that. So to have the flute be recognized, we're going to make it a track that puts sound in. It's not going to be sending any sound out. We're primarily concerned with it picking up the flute. So it's a track that's in, and since the microphone is plugged into input 1, I have input 1 selected here. Input 2 has nothing coming out of it. I can clap and snap, and the 2 volume indicator has nothing. So that shows you that nothing is plugged into the second input. Now you can play all you want into the flute, and this is picking it up. Now the one thing you'll have to do with the flute track is to add reverberation. So in Ableton, reverb is already something that is built in when you open the program with a new project. If reverb is not built in to your program, you can go into the audio effects window. I can search reverb and it's right there. And you can play around with the dry and the wet and the type of reverb depending on the space you're performing in. Now let's set up the output. Now if you are not performing with the click track, this is basically all good to go. You just have to make sure that outputs 1 and 2 are where the audio is going. That usually happens automatically, but you might have to use that drop-down menu and figure out what's going on if it's not. Now if you'd like to use a click track, though, if you are using a Mac and you want the click track to be coming out of the headphone jack, you can go into your audio MIDI setup and create what's called an aggregate device. I have one right here. If you don't see that, you can hit the plus sign and hit create aggregate device. I select my interface because I'm using it, and then I select the headphones that I want the click track to come out of. And now the computer has actually made a new device and combined them both for me to use in my program. So I go back into my settings, and usually when you've made a new device, it's not going to show up right away. And I'm going to restart the program. Now, hopefully, it will be there. Yes, aggregate device. So that becomes your output. Now, you'll want to make sure that the outputs that the headphones are coming out of line up with your program. The headphones are output 7 and 8. So you want to make sure that those are available to you in the program. Mine are not automatically. So I go to my settings and I hit output configuration and make sure 7 and 8, which line up with the numbers down here, are available. You just have to send it to the outputs you're using. So external out is what I would pick in Ableton, and I would choose 7 and 8. And that way, when I run it, the electronics will be going through these cables into the speakers, and this click is going to go into the headphones. So thanks so much for listening, and good luck.